What's up guys, it's J-Man, and let's talk about the biggest and longest of all the spy franchises, the Mission Impossible movies. The franchise based on a TV series from the 60s with an iconic theme song that's hugely popular, that produced 5 sequels and at the time of this video upload has 2 more on the way. All of them are very different from each other, with each one, except the last one, having a different director at the helm, which is pretty admirable and something to appreciate about Tom Cruise's desire to keep things fresh and to let each director bring their own uniqueness to each installment. However, people's reactions to these movies tend to be pretty mixed about which one is better than the other. A lot of people view the latter 3 as the best, while the first 3 are good but not as good. For me personally, the Mission Impossible movies are a franchise where the odd-numbered ones tend to be the better ones. And that's not to say that I hate any of these movies, but I think we can all agree that some are objectively less good than others. So my mission in this video, should I choose to accept it, which obviously I do, is to rank all the Mission Impossible movies thus far from worst to best. Starting with number 6, Mission Impossible 2. Yes, this is usually the last on everybody's list, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't know why. It's definitely the most cheesiest out of all the movies and is way too over the top for its own good. But with that being said, it's kind of a guilty pleasure for me. I enjoy movies made by a director with a very distinct style, and John Woo is definitely one of those. And some things in this movie are admittedly kind of fun. But what makes it the least good for everyone really is that it's not really a Mission Impossible movie. It's a Tom Cruise action movie. Every shot of every sequence in this movie is made to make Tom Cruise look like an action star. It's not really about the mission or the people he works with, it's about beating the bad guy, saving the hot girl, and walking off into the distance. I kind of enjoy it more than most, but it's definitely no better than the rest of them. Next, number 5, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Yeah, believe it or not, I'm actually one of the few people to not really care for this movie that much. For many reasons, which I'll get into, but mostly because it's one of those movies where you can tell everyone just doesn't want to be there. Like, you can tell that even the people that make the franchise are getting tired of it. Honestly, the guy at the beginning was actually pretty cool, and I would have loved to have seen more of him, but he's killed within the first couple of minutes. Also, it's way too much of a self-satire. Now, don't get me wrong, some self-satire is good, but not at the film's own expense. With this film, their equipment was faulty, the jokes were out of place, the villain is so cliched. He's just one of those bad guys who thinks that chaos brings order. He wants total control of nuclear weapons, something that we've seen a million times already. Not to mention, the team themselves don't really do anything in the movie. If anything, they just inadvertently assist the main villain in accomplishing his mission. Sure, she kills the female assassin, but as it later turns out, that was actually a bad thing to do. They don't do anything of use until literally the very last minute when they defeat the bad guy and stop the nuke. No, actually, I take that back. They don't even defeat the main bad guy. He literally defeats himself. We'll be right back with What the Hell Were You Trying to Do? Also, I'm kind of upset that they split Ethan and Julia up. For certain reasons that are brought up in Fallout, but in this movie it's the usual cop-out of as long as we were together, she wouldn't be safe. Isn't that why he stopped doing missions altogether and went into teaching instead? Not to mention it's a complete 180 from the relationship he was so committed to in the third one. Now he decides his job is too dangerous? But with all that being said, I wouldn't call it a terrible movie in any way. It's a movie I can definitely watch, and Jeremy Renner, who is one of my favorite actors, does a pretty damn good job in it. So it's worth the number 5 spot on the list. Next, number 4, Mission Impossible Fallout. Now this one is definitely one of the better ones. It's got great action, great performances, and even some great surprises. But for the most part, and I'm just speaking honestly here, it's frankly kind of boring. It is a bit long and definitely drags a lot, and it seems to have a different plot every 20 minutes or so. First it's about retrieving plutonium cores. Then it's about capturing the villain from the last movie. Then it's about stopping John Lark from escaping. Then it's about disabling a bomb, which is one of the most generic plot devices ever. Also, it's one of those films where Ethan Hunt is really getting up there with age. He just looks tired a lot, and it's not really all that fun to see his ass get kicked that much. And to bring up the whole thing with Ethan and Julia, they now reveal that the biggest reason they had to separate is because whenever something bad happened in the world, whenever a catastrophe had occurred, he would feel bad because he and IMF weren't there to stop it from happening. Dude, you are not an Avenger. There are other agencies in the world that can handle stuff like that. But no, they actually validated by having Julia say how much she loves her new life, that leaving her was all for the best. She met someone new and she has a great career. Look, I'll talk about why I was such a fan of him and Julia when we get to the third one, but for now let's move on to number 3. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Now this is definitely a better one too. It's got great action, great suspense, and is one of the better written ones. Probably the small things that I have against it is that the main bad guy is a bit too much of a corny Bond villain, with his deep, raspy voice and cold, calculating demeanor. Also, some of it I would say is a bit predictable. You can tell when something bad is about to happen during the mission. You can tell when a misdirect is about to happen in the story. Also, the lead female character Ilsa can be a bit frustrating. Like, first she's bad, but then she's actually good. But then she double-crosses them, which means she's bad. And then she's working with them, which means she's good again. You don't really know what side she's on until much later, even though it would be nice to know. It's one of my favorites of the franchise, but it's definitely not the best of it. Next up. Number 2. Mission Impossible. The one that started it all. I love the deep noir atmosphere this one has, as well as the spy thriller edge, which has definitely been lacking in the sequels. It's got some of the best suspense and heart-pounding moments, and even if some of the twist reveals are a bit obvious, they never feel obvious in this one. They're actually done very cleverly with the writing and even the editing. Also, some of it has that classic Brian De Palma eeriness to it, with the Dutch angles, the twitching violins, and even some deep dark elements which kind of borders on psychological thriller territory. Probably the only reason that it's not number 1 is because the main plot is a bit stale. It's basically just about the main character being set up and he has to clear his name. So at this point, you probably know what's coming. The number 1 Mission Impossible movie is Mission Impossible 3. Now I know what you're thinking. Why this one? The action is too frenetic, the twists were a bit obvious, and it's directed by a guy who is talented, but at the same time, he's what a lot of people would call a tribute director, or a nostalgia director. Really, the best thing about his movies is that they remind you of better stuff from the past. Hey, wasn't Wrath of Khan great? Hey, wasn't E.T. great? Hey, wasn't the original trilogy much better? Hey, I did Alias. So with all that being said, why do I favor this one above all the other Mission Impossibles? 2 words. Personal stakes. You see, in the other movies, the stakes were always about the world or IMF or Ethan's innocence. And not to say that those are bad, it's just that they can only go so far before the audience actually starts to care enough. The main protagonist needs a personal reason for him to be involved, and in this movie, he does. He's just a guy who wants to save his wife, something that we can all relate to. This is the only movie in the franchise where Ethan has a personal stake that doesn't involve his job. Maybe the same argument could be made for Naya in MI2, but they only ever met in that one movie, and even then she was mostly relegated to nothing more than a prop in the film. Whereas with this film, we get this feeling of history between them that goes beyond the movie, where they first met, their first date, and they have such great chemistry with each other that I really find it believable. Furthermore, I love that Ethan Hunt is not portrayed as a superhero in this. He's just a regular guy. He's a guy that can get hurt, he's a guy that can fail, he's a guy that can lose his temper, he's a guy that needs the help of others. And I've heard some people say that him and Julia would never work out anyway since he has a dangerous job and she would never survive. But here's where the ending comes in. She saves Ethan twice and defeats the main villain, and when she resuscitates him, it still moves me to this day. Even though this moment was completely ruined by the next sequel coming out, it's very emotional because it shows that she realizes he does dangerous work, but she still chooses to be with him anyway. She fights for him, and that's something that the sequels or even the first one have never come close to even touching. And I haven't even talked about Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain yet. He plays such a sadistic and even infuriating bad guy that it's just so memorable. Not to mention, it feels more like a Mission Impossible movie in that it has actual missions in it that are very elaborate and feel like some effort was actually put into conceiving them. So I know there will definitely be some people who disagree with me, but for me, the third one is definitely the best Impossible mission. So that was my ranking on the Mission Impossible movies. How do you guys rank them? Whatever it is, don't be shy, leave a reply. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and please support me on Patreon. All links are down below in the description. And of course, if you like this video, you can like, comment, and subscribe to the J-Man. Keep looking deep.